The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
Okay, let's go.
Hey everybody, happy Friday. Okay, I'm in a much better mood today. Oh my gosh, what a mess that second Republican debate was. And when I listened to yesterday's episode, God, I sounded so sad and melancholy. I mean, I was tired. It was late at night. I was recording that episode. But anyway, definitely in a better mood today. And happy Friday to everybody. So, I spent some time yesterday looking through a lot of the feedback from various places about the debate. And a lot of it, I guess, did echo my sentiment. It seemed overall, I think everybody thought it was a hot mess and just a total debacle. I will say I did get a couple pieces of clarification that I wanted to pass on. I really didn't understand Chris Christie when he said Donald Duck, but I guess he was saying that Trump was ducking certain things. So it was a pun, I guess, but that definitely did not hit the mark with me, and I'm assuming it didn't hit the mark with other people. The one thing I still can't really get over was just how funny it was that the candidates were all bad-mouthing TikTok and that Fox literally aired a TikTok commercial during the debate. So in honor of that moment of money ridiculousness, I'm going to make today's episode an episode I've been wanting to do for a while, and that is really talk about TikTok and talk about basically the good and the bad, and share with you guys a little bit of my experience with TikTok, and then also talk about something called the Restrict Act, which, is part of this whole TikTok issue. And in many ways, the Restrict Act is like the digital online version of what happened with the Patriot Act after 9/11. And so there's a lot of opinion that TikTok is being used as a Trojan horse in order to push through a bigger overall picture under this Restrict Act. And that way there's a level of control online similar to really what was implemented with the Patriot Act after 9/11. So I'm going to play some clips for you guys from various sources. And again, I'm not really saying one thing or another. I'm not really definitively giving you an answer on this, but I do think that the discussion about TikTok needs to be understood a little bit more from actually what the content is on TikTok. Because again, I'm a late adopter to TikTok. It's been only probably 6 months or so that I've gotten on it and that I've been using it. And prior to that, I was in the camp of, okay, hey, this is weird. It's a Chinese spy machine. They're gathering our data. They're seeing what we're doing. And again, all of that potentially is true. But I did go through the terms of service, and then I looked at the terms of service for Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, and I will say they are all very similar. So in terms of what is getting collected data-wise, they're all very similar between TikTok and then Google and Meta, who is the parent company of Facebook. So that's that. And then from there, the other thing is when it comes to the apps that we download on our phones, whether you are an Apple user and you're using the App Store for your iPhone, or if you have an Android phone and you're using, I think, the Google App Store, the Google Play Store in order to download Android apps, it's surprising to me that more, I guess, emphasis isn't put on those parties, meaning Apple and Google. And for example, if they think that TikTok is doing something with the data that they're accessing on their hardware and then via their software that is downloaded through their app store, wouldn't you think that two of the most valuable companies in the world, Apple and Google, they would have put the kibosh on it. Like they would have said, hey, you know what? Yeah, we see what's happening. I'm sure the technology and the software is so dialed in that they basically know everything that's going on. And so, if there was a tremendous danger through accessing TikTok via the App Store on the iPhones or the App Store on Android devices, I would think there would be a level of expectation for Google and Apple to rein that in. And all of these Senate and congressional meetings and senators and congressmen, they should be adamant saying, hey, you guys can put an end to this potential issue so easily. But nobody's saying that. Nobody's doing that. They're not putting the onus on really the method that we could access TikTok. So again, I don't know what all that means, but it would seem to me that entities such as Apple and Google, they do their own due diligence to see if there's true potential for, I guess, something crazy scary. Otherwise, they would not let it in the App Store. There was an issue with that with the Uber app that occurred with Google, I believe, and that was kind of well documented years back, where the Uber app was accessing, data within our smartphones to then better route cars and things like that. And I know that got sniffed out pretty easily. And so you would think in this case they could. All right. Anyway, let's start off. I'm going to play for you something, and then I'm going to comment.
So one of the bills that would ban TikTok is being pushed, as we said, by senators in both parties. It's called the Restrict Act.
Just a real quick side note, I wanted to show everybody. See, that's an R, that's a D, that's an R, that's a D, that's an R, that's a D, that's an R. This is not a red versus blue issue.
Now, the Restrict Act not only makes it illegal for Americans to use TikTok, it is the Patriot Act 2.0 for the internet.
The bill gives the federal government the power to monitor any activity used by these suspected devices, virtual or otherwise. Essentially, they can monitor what you are doing at home 24/7 without even informing you. This includes things such as routers, video games, streaming apps, smart thermostats, Ring cameras, basically anything that uses the internet.
Senator Lindsey Graham, who supports this and is here now. You got to be kidding me, Senator.
Yeah, I don't think I support the Restrict Act.
You don't support this because you were named as one of the supporters, because this is garbage.
This isn't about banning TikTok. Instead, this bill would give enormous and terrifying new powers to the federal government, with the government in charge of what you read and see, and with terrifying punitive powers at their fingertips.
Okay, so that was a montage of clips that I spliced together. And, it started out with Tucker Carlson. There were a couple of folks that you guys wouldn't know providing perspective, but you could also hear Tulsi Gabbard in that, where she talked about and compared it to the Patriot Act. And then that was Jesse Waters interviewing Senator Lindsey Graham. And ironically, not only was Lindsey Graham's signature on the Restrict Act, he is a co-sponsor of the bill. And so when he said, is that the Restrict Act? I don't think I signed that. He did sign it. He literally was the co-sponsor of that bill. So think about that. And then Tucker kind of ended it. Now, here is what is incredibly interesting about that montage of clips. So I literally got all that information from TikTok. And this is where I want to just provide a little bit of perspective. For those of you that listened to yesterday's episode, I opened it up with a fantastic 1-minute speech from Ronald Reagan, which actually was in 1976. I thought it was 1986. So quick correction, that was 1976 that he gave that speech. And if you didn't hear it, it's actually worth listening to. The entire episode is worth listening to, but if you didn't want to listen to the entire episode from yesterday, just listen to the first minute. And the speech Reagan gave, it's eerie that it kind of is applicable today, which is almost, 50 years later. But even that speech, if you go into TikTok and you put Ronald Reagan speeches, it's amazing what comes up. I mean, you can literally educate yourself on practically all the speeches that Ronald Reagan gave, even better than you could learn on YouTube. Anything, pick any topic, especially if it's a controversial topic that, didn't get coverage in mainstream news. Like when a few months ago, issues started in Sudan, I did a story on Facebook and Instagram on that, and I pretty much gathered all that data from TikTok. Citizen journalism, people posting things in real time. I think I've shared this example previously where during the summer, if you remember, there were the riots and fires in Paris, in France, and somebody did a comparison of what you see when you type Paris in Instagram versus what you see when you type Paris in TikTok. And it was amazing, actually. In Instagram, you see the Eiffel Tower, you see the Les Arcs de Triomphe, and basically you see all the touristy stuff of Paris that are beautiful, baguettes, people wearing goofy beanies. You see all that stuff. And then in TikTok, when you typed Paris in, you saw real-time footage of what was taking place. The semi-riots, the looting, the fires, all the things that were happening real-time in Paris. You really could only see that on TikTok. So that was one of the first times to me where I was like, okay, wow, that's amazing. And then I will say from there, when I go to do research for stuff, and hopefully by now I research things a lot. Like I'm not going to say anything or I'm not going to talk about anything unless I've done some really thorough research so I can back up, any statement I make or back up any real opinion that I have. And I can honestly say TikTok has supplanted YouTube as my primary source of seeking information. Now I am getting a lot of what I think is good information using either ChatGPT or Google Bard. But even those, the database that they're pulling from is obviously the internet. And so you're not getting that, again, I guess that citizen journalism that you're able to get on a TikTok or even YouTube. But I will say there is a lot of censorship on YouTube. There really is a lot of censorship on YouTube that doesn't seem to happen as much on TikTok. Now, the caveat of that and the flip side of that, there is censorship on TikTok that happens, and I've experienced that as well. And I will say there was something I posted that was a little bit critical on China, not even in a really bad way. Oh, it was talking about the various surveillance systems and cameras in terms of the social credit score concept that is happening in China. And there was something I posted. I'll try to go back and find exactly what it was, but it did get flagged and it did get taken down. And then another thing, this was actually pretty funny. This is actually a pretty funny story overall. So, gosh, maybe 6 months ago, and again, this was purely out of my own curiosity, I didn't know the difference. Honestly, I really didn't know the difference of Al-Qaeda versus the Taliban versus ISIS versus Hamas versus Hezbollah, all these Islamic. God, I'm gonna probably get flagged for this and have Secret Service show up at my door or something. All these Islamic terrorist organizations. I seriously just was I don't know the difference between any of these. I'm kind of curious. What is the difference between these? Not that I want to do anything or anything. I just would like to understand the difference between these entities. And so, I did a bunch of research and there was nothing about any of those on TikTok. I did find that interesting. So I got most of that data on YouTube. And when I created like a 90-second, like the Taliban for Dummies tutorial, which was hilarious. And by the way, a funny shout out to my friend Paul, who I've mentioned before. He always has astute observations. He literally called me up after I posted the second one, and he's like, "Hey, dude, yeah, I totally see what you're doing here, and it's cool. I don't know the difference between these either, but like, you may want to stop posting these unless you want to never fly again." So that was hilarious, and I was like, "Oh God, I think you're right." Obviously, my intentions were only for educational purposes, but I did find that interesting that there was no real information about any of those organizations on TikTok. And then when I posted my little clips, which again, the clips were just like, hey, this is what Hamas is. Like, I pulled from CNN, I pulled from Fox, I pulled from all, mainstream sources that described those organizations. It got taken down on TikTok. So that was interesting. And, I want to be balanced about this. Like I'm not some huge, TikTok advocate saying that it's actually good and not bad. Again, I don't know at the end of the day if any of this stuff truly is good or bad. I can tell you they are all collecting our data. They are all, it's so ironic to me when I search something on any of the devices or any of the platforms, I should say, and speakers, which I have way too many of, or if I mention something, it's pretty crazy. Within hours, something shows up in my feed about what I was searching for or talking about. The searching, that one makes sense because I think they put cookies into the different websites and the different places that you go, and they can track that via those cookies. And then what they do with those cookies probably is why if you do a search on, let's say, coffee makers, that's why within hours you'll have, coffee makers in your Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or whatever feed, X, I should say. But as far as like the stuff that I talk about, that's interesting that I get ads and then also posts about that stuff when it's not directly, a website search where it can be cookied, but it seems like more of some type of listening software.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, I know. Some type of listening software. I might start interjecting some funny clips like that one. I actually got a lot of good responses to my main man, Russell Westbrook, and the next question soundbite that occurred. So I'll try to start doing some funny stuff. Anyway, at the end of the day, when it comes to TikTok, I want you to hear something else, which again, I think is very interesting. So give this a listen.
Truth is, with 100 million Americans daily on TikTok on an average of 90 minutes a day, this is an issue. We've got to make sure that we take care of that national security based concern. The Restrict Act is more than about TikTok. It will give us that comprehensive approach.
So that was Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, and he's the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. And that was about 6 months ago when, again, it was a bipartisan effort. Lindsey Graham on the Republican side, and then Mark Warner on the Democratic side. And what I thought was interesting with that speech was, he kind of said the quiet part out loud, where he talked about saying to the audience, obviously this was addressed to the audience, because he said, I'm sure most of you would like to get 100 million Americans on your entity for 90 minutes a day. So obviously there was media, and again, by media, I'm talking the network media in the audience, And he was addressing them saying, hey, this is a problem. We've got too many Americans spending 90 minutes a day on TikTok, where I know you guys want them to be spending 9 minutes a day watching your TV shows or your networks or whatever. So I thought that was interesting. And then even at the end, he literally said that this gives us, the Restrict Act is much more than just TikTok. Here, listen to it again.
Truth is, with 100 million Americans daily on TikTok on an average of 90 minutes a day, this is an issue. We've got to make sure that we take care of that national security based concern. The Restrict Act is more than about TikTok. It will give us that comprehensive approach.
So he called it a national-based security concern. And then again, he said the Restrict Act is more than just about TikTok. It'll give us that comprehensive approach. So, that is interesting, as I like to say, which, by the way, was one of the top 5 things that that transcript software said I say a lot. And I'm going to be giving you that list next week. All right. Well, listen, I am going to wrap this up today. This will probably be something we come back to, but it is something that I've wanted to cover because, again, the jury's not out for me on TikTok. I don't really, or I should say, I can't really say one way or the other, whether I'm completely supportive or completely against. But I will say that it is a tremendous resource when you go looking for the truth on things or a different version of the truth. And, I'd recommend, if you feel like it, test it out for yourself. Like I did with that Ronald Reagan quote. Like I said, all the clips you heard today, even the Senator Mark Warner clip that we heard twice, I pulled all that from TikTok. So it's pretty interesting that it does house what I think is valuable research information. But again, at the same time, I can't say for sure that, there are no underlying issues. But what I will say is, I think at the end of the day, when it comes to the concept of taking your data and then trying to sell you things based on your data, I think TikTok and every other tech company, including Google, Meta, whomever, they're all doing that. They absolutely all doing that. They are all doing that. They're retargeting you. They are, cooking the searches that you do online. And that's why certain things follow you around. That's why when you're looking for a toaster oven, you'll start seeing toaster ovens everywhere. So, all right. Anyway, I hope this was informative. I hope we called a spade, and I wish everybody a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
This episode was brought to you by Boost Liquid Vitamins. Wake up, take your Boost, start your day. Drink your vitamins, build your immune system with Boost. Available on Boost.com.